You know how it is that it just seems to happen in life that there are people that are in your life and you just don't know how special they are, how lucky you are to have them, how blessed you are to have them until they're gone. Well, when I was a kid, my brothers and sister and I, we knew how lucky, how blessed we were to have Uncle Bubba. He was so special to us, so wonderful to us. It was my mother's brother, and his real name was Morris, but everybody called him Uncle Bubba. And Uncle Bubba lived on the other side of the river. We lived in Jefferson County, and he lived over in Brooke County. And it was just a matter of taking the ferry across the river or crossing the bridge at Steubenville to go and visit with him. When you're one of 6 kids and 4 of them are boys, you don't just call the little girl down the street and say, "Hey, come babysit my kids," because there just might not be too many survivors at the end of the evening. So Uncle Bubba would come and he would be our babysitter. He was our storyteller and he was our teacher, and he would help us out with school projects, and he taught the boys how to throw a spitball and fastball and how to Indian leg wrestle and how to carve things out of sticks. And he taught us girls. He taught us girls how to throw a spitball and a fastball and how to Indian leg wrestle and carve things out of sticks. He was just wonderful. And he would just jump in his car and cross that river just the drop of a hat. You could call him and say, "My school play is going to be on Wednesday night, and I'm going to be the third cactus from the left." And he'd say, "What time is it? I'll be there." And he would. He'd show up. And sometimes he'd just pull up in front of the house and fling the door open and say, "Who wants to go get ice cream?" Or "Who wants to go to the drive-in theater?" "Who wants to go play baseball?" Or "Float down the high river on a truck tube. It's going to be fun." And it always was. And the minute he'd fling open that door and shout for us, we'd all yell, "I want to go, Uncle Bubba. I want to do it. I want to do it." And we'd all just pile down the steps and out the door. Well, one day he came to our house and he flung open the door and he said, "Hey, who wants to go for a ride in my new car?" "Oh, I do, Uncle Bubba." We all started shouting and ran down the steps and out the door, and there it was. It was beautiful. It was powder blue. It was a brand new 1962 Spider Corvair. It was the best car we ever saw, and it was all Uncle Bubba's. And I don't know if you have ever heard of a Corvair, but they were kind of like, well, America's answer to the Volkswagen. The engine was in the back, and the front place where the engine should have been was the trunk. That itself was really amazing to us kids, and especially the boys. They climbed right into that car and started cranking the windows down and rolling the windows up, crank them down, roll them up. Then Randy found the ashtray. They used to have ashtrays at cars too. And that had a little spring on the lid. So he'd flip it up and he'd say, "Richie, put your finger in there." Snap. "Billy, put your finger in there." Snap. "Bizzie, put your finger in there." "Go away, Randy." And then we all started saying we wanted to go somewhere. We wanted to go somewhere. And he said, "Get in the car. We'll take us a little ride." So my mother got in the front seat. It was the first time we'd ever seen bucket seats in a car. It was just so cool. We got in, and she rode in the front, and Uncle drove, and 6 of us kids had to squeeze ourselves into the one little back seat, because the Corvair was what you call a compact car. So we were kind of compact in those days, so we could do it. And we had this way of climbing into a car Uncle Bubba called our long-standing seating arrangement. And that is the 3 big kids would sit on the seat, and the 3 little kids would sit on top of the 3 big kids. But we weren't hampered by seat belts or anything like that, so we just climb in. Plus, he would have had to hit something really hard, going really fast for us to budge an inch. We were so wedged into that car. So we went riding down the road with all the windows down. Then the boys would put them up again. Then they'd roll them down again. Well, you know how it is. You got 6 kids in the back seat of a small car. And before you know it, you start to hear things like, his feet's on my side. Get your elbow out of my rib. You're going to wear out my lap. Sit still. Well, then my mother said, well, Uncle Bubba, maybe we could just stop somewhere and take a little break, let the kids out of the car, maybe have a Coca-Cola. And he said, a Coca-Cola? She said, oh, yeah, Coca-Cola, because my mother loved Coca-Cola. And Uncle Bubba said, you kids want a Coca-Cola? Oh, yeah, Uncle Bubba, we want a Coca-Cola. We'll stop with you and get a Coca-Cola. Are you sure you kids want a Coca-Cola? Well, yeah. He said, oh, I don't know. I haven't had a Coca-Cola since they found that dead man in the vat. Uncle Bubba, they found a dead man in the vat? Oh, you children didn't hear about that? Now, the one thing about Uncle Bubba was he always knew a fella. He said, I know this fella works up there at the Pittsburgh bottling plant, see? And he told me all about it. You kids didn't hear about it? No, Uncle Bubba. They found a dead man, really? He said, oh, yes. You know how they make Coca-Cola? No, Uncle Bubba, we don't know how they make it. He said, well, you know how Coca-Cola is all bubblesome. You know, it's all fizzy. If you go to pop the top off there and pour it out, you might get a big frothy mess all over the place. So you just can't just go throwing ingredients into a pot, stir it up, make Coca-Cola. Oh no, they have these big vats, great big vats. They're like 10, 15 feet tall. And on the side of them is a ladder, see? And there's a crew of about 5 men that come in every day in their work boots and their hard hats, and they climb up the ladder, and there's a platform at the top that goes all the way around the vat. And they have all the ingredients up there they need. They put on white lab coats, and then hanging from hooks in the ceiling above the vat, there's these really long spoons. So they start putting the stuff in there real careful like, and then when they get it all in there, they take those spoons down off the hook, and then all 5 of those men walk real slow around the top of that vat on that platform, stirring up the Coca-Cola. And then when they have it all stirred up good, they hang those spoons back up, and then one of them grabs hold of the chain, and he pulls the plug out of the bottom of the vat, and all that Coca-Cola goes sucked down through the pipes and tubing and gets shot down through the plant and dumps into the bottles, and then someone else puts a tops on the Coca-Cola bottles, and then all the bottles are put into wooden crates, and then the crates are loaded on the truck, and then they take that Coca-Cola all over Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, all over the world probably. And it goes to stores and gas stations, and then you buy it and drink it, and that's how you get Coca-Cola. Well, it just happened this one day. They pulled the plug on a fresh batch of Coca-Cola, and the men climbed down off the ladder and went on home, and the next morning they showed up to work, and one of them says, we're short a man. Where's Frank? And they started looking around, and they said, oh, I don't know, maybe he's late. Maybe he's sick. So they climbed up the ladder in their work boots, and they took down their white coats and went to put them on, and turned around, and there was Frank laying in the bottom of the vat. And that Coca-Cola, that stuff gets sucked down through that tubing so fast that there was just pieces of his lab coat and work boots left on the grate. The rest of him was gone. And then one of the fellows looked up and said, has the truck left? And they all ran down to the loading dock, and the truck was gone, and Frank had gone out, and Coca-Cola bottles to all over the place. So I'll tell you children what I'll do. I'll stop over there at Follinsby at the Dairy Owl, and I'll buy you kids a Coca-Cola. But what you have to do is you have to take that bottle and you have to hold it up in the sunlight. and see if you see anything in there. Well, if you see something like, well, a zipper tab from his pants or a button from his jacket or maybe his name, well, then you go on and drink that Coca-Cola if you want to. But if you see anything else, like, oh, maybe a piece of kidney or some part of an eyeball or a fingernail, any part of Frank floating around in that Coca-Cola, well, then we have to go to Weirton, because his wife has a bulletin board up there at Weirton. And on that bulletin board is a picture of Frank. And she has a phone number to call. And it says, have you seen me or any little part of me? And if you see something in that Coca-Cola bottle, then we have to call that number and take those parts over to her, because she's collecting all the parts she can get of Frank and putting them in a freezer out on her back porch till she gets enough of him to have a burial. So if you kids find anything else in there, we got to go to Weirton. So we pulled into the dairy aisle, and we all squeezed out of that car and went over and ordered our Coca-Cola, except that my sister and I, we ordered milkshakes. Well, we sat down at the picnic table, and Uncle Bubba came over with the root beer float, sat across from us, and he said, look there at those boys, all holding that pop up to the light to see if they see Frank. You think they'll find him? Oh, no, Uncle Bubba, we hope they don't find him. Oh, that'd be horrible to find a piece of somebody in a Coca-Cola bottle. He said, yeah, that really would. But I'm surprised at you girls ordering a milkshake. I haven't had a milkshake, well, since they found all the snakes in the dairy. We had lots of fun and adventures in that car with Uncle Bubba, and we didn't care if some big shot named Ralph Nader said that the Corvair was unsafe at any speed. We didn't care at all, because we were with Uncle Bubba. We were safe. We were lucky. We were blessed. This next story is one that I wrote for my grandson Ben, a story of encouragement. You know, sometimes kids have a tough time getting a grip on some things at school, and he was getting a little frustrated, and I just wanted him to feel encouraged that, you know, not everything comes easy. And so this is what I did for Ben. Ryan was pouring on the speed. He was running his best, his fastest. His legs were pumping like pistons. It was running faster than any of the other second grade boys, and faster than the third grade boys, and even better, he was running faster than his brother Tommy. Tommy was behind him for once. He could barely believe it himself. He was beating Tommy. Tommy usually beat him at everything. But here he was out in front of the pack, and the finish line was just a few feet ahead. Ryan began grinning ear to ear, and winning would be so good, but beating Tommy, that would be even better. And just as he was a few steps from victory, Tommy blew past him like he was standing still. And the grin on Ryan's face dropped, and his heart sank with it. Then Tommy pounded his feet to stop, and he said, Squirt, you didn't think you were going to beat me now, did you? Oh. Then Tommy and his friends started laughing at him and calling him stupid names, and Ryan thought, oh man, I should have known. I can't beat Tommy at anything. Tommy was the older brother, and he'd been competing and beating Ryan at things ever since they were real little kids. And anytime Ryan complained about it, Tommy would call him Crying Ryan. And he'd laugh. He'd call him Squirt. And the thing that Ryan really hated was when he called him Little Brother. And Tommy seemed to just goad Ryan into all kinds of competitions just to beat him. Who could run the fastest, who could jump higher, who could climb to the top of the monkey bars fastest, who could eat lunch the fastest, even who could do the loudest armpit farts. And Tommy beat Ryan at everything. Tommy even beat him out of bed in the morning. Ryan was just sick of it. Well, he dragged himself home that day. His mother was on her knees in the garden, and she saw that boy coming with the long face, and she said, "Oh, Ryan, Tommy win again?" "Yeah." "What was it this time, honey? Spitting?" Ryan plopped down in the grass next to his mom, and he said, "No, sprints. Tommy's bigger than me, and he's stronger, and I just can't beat him." His mother said, "Oh, I don't know about that. I wouldn't be too sure about that. You know, your Aunt Evelyn's my big sister, and she used to beat me at everything, too. And then when we got into junior high, the coach said to me, 'Carol, you know, training is everything. And if you put your mind to it and you train your body, you could beat your sister, because she's just one of those natural runners with long legs. But if you practice, you train, you can beat her, because she's lazy and she never does.'" Well, you know what? I did just what the coach told me. I trained, I practiced it. Well, I never became a track star, but I could beat your Aunt Evelyn every time. All it took was beating her once, and she just had to learn to take losing. But I think maybe what you guys ought to practice the most is brotherly love. But Ryan thought about it. And he thought, well, you know, Mom's probably right. If I'm going to beat Tommy, I'm going to have to train. It just might be that training is everything. So he got up early in the morning to train. And he'd hide out from Tommy and the gang to do it, too. He didn't want them to know. Boy, they'd never stop the teasing and the laughing if they found out. So he'd sneak off in the woods behind their house to train. He was determined to be ready for the next competition, whatever it was. So finally, the end of that week, on Friday, Tommy and his gang came up to Ryan and he said, "Get your gym shorts and your Nikes on. Meet us in the practice field out behind the bleachers right after school today. Unless you're afraid you'll lose again, Squirt." Oh, man, that was it. That was it. Ryan said, "Oh, I'm going to get him this time. This time, he's going to have to learn to like losing. That's going to just be it." Well, after school that day, he grabbed his gym shorts and Nikes and he walked purposefully to the practice field. Well, there were the boys out there waiting. Some of them were sort of bouncing from foot to foot on the starting line and talking to each other and warming up, you know, shaking their hands and knees. And Ryan got in line at one end and leaned forward, and there was Tommy at the other end. When all the boys got themselves lined up on the line and got ready, and at a signal from one of the older boys, all the boys took off their gym shorts and they began to pee. And for the first time, Tommy was going to have to learn to like losing, because all that training paid off. Ryan had trained, and it was everything. He could see that, because he peed farther and longer than any of the other second graders. He peed farther and longer than the third graders, and he beat Tommy. He peed farther and longer than Tommy, and Tommy was going to have to learn to take losing. He was never going to get to call Ryan Squirt again. You know how it is that it just seems to happen in life, that there are people